You are nothing but a jealous, ugly baker." My sister screamed those words at me, her face twisted in rage, tears streaming down her perfectly contoured cheeks. The guests at the engagement party of the century gasped, their champagne glasses frozen mid-air. Then, the man she was about to marry, the billionaire heir to the Sterling Empire, walked into the room. He walked right past her outstretched, trembling hand. He walked past my mother, who was already formulating a lie to save face. He stopped directly in front of me. I stood there, covered in soot, my arms blistering from second-degree burns, smelling of smoke and burnt sugar. He looked me in the eye and said the words that would burn my family to the ground. "I have been trying to find you for 6 months." My mother went pale. My sister stopped crying instantly. Before I tell you how a simple cake toppled a dynasty, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been the invisible one who held everything together while others took the credit. My name is Sophia, and at 32 years old, I was the family secret. To the elite circles of Atlanta, the Vance family was royalty. My mother, Renee, was the queen of philanthropy. My younger sister, Jasmine, was the princess, a lifestyle influencer with 2 million followers who preached about Black excellence and luxury living. And me. I was the stain they could not quite scrub away. I owned a crumbling bakery called Grandma's Oven in a forgotten part of town. I had flour under my fingernails instead of French manicures. I had burns on my forearms instead of diamond bracelets. But what nobody knew, not even my own family, was that the culinary genius they worshipped, the mysterious creator known only as the Ghost Alchemist, was me. It was supposed to be Jasmine's night, the engagement party that would cement her status as the future wife of Liam Sterling. The Sterling estate was a sprawling mansion that looked more like a museum than a home. I was not there as a guest. I was there as staff. My mother had made it very clear. "You are to stay in the kitchen, Sophia. Make sure the catering team does not mess up. And for God's sake, do not let Liam see you. You look like a servant, so act like one." I was in the back kitchen, putting the final touches on the 5-tier wedding cake. It was my masterpiece. A vanilla bean chiffon sponge with a passion fruit reduction, coated in a tempered chocolate glaze that shimmered like liquid gold. I had spent 72 hours on the sugar work alone, pulling sponge sugar into delicate orchids that looked so real you would expect them to have a scent. Jasmine breezed into the kitchen with her phone on a gimbal, live streaming to her fans. "Hey guys, just checking on the prep for the big reveal. Look at this dress. It is not easy being a bride-to-be." She spun around, her massive tulle skirt knocking into a tray of appetizers. She ignored it. Then, to get better lighting for her ring light, she yanked a cord out of the wall. "Jasmine, no!" I shouted, but it was too late. That was not just an outlet. She had unplugged the industrial cooling unit for the chocolate tempering machine, which was sitting next to a gas burner. The spark from the sudden voltage drop ignited the pressurized canister of cooking spray I had left on the counter. Boom! A wall of fire erupted between me and the door. The heat was instantaneous and suffocating. The fire suppression system failed. It always failed in this old wing of the house. Jasmine screamed, dropping her phone. She scrambled backward, tripping over her dress, crawling toward the exit. "Help! Someone help me! My dress!" She ran. She left me there. I looked at the fire. Then I looked at the cake. That cake was worth $15,000. But more importantly, it was the only thing standing between my mother and a lawsuit from the catering company. If this cake was ruined, they would blame me. They always blamed me. I did not think. I grabbed the heavy marble base of the cake stand. The metal rim was already searing hot. I felt the skin on my forearms sizzle as I lifted the 50-pound structure. The flames licked at my apron. I held my breath, squinting against the stinging smoke, and charged through the gap in the fire. I kicked the swinging doors open with my foot, bursting into the cool, air-conditioned hallway. I stumbled, my knees hitting the floor, but I kept the cake upright. The golden glaze was untouched. The sugar orchids were perfect. I collapsed against the wall, gasping for air, my lungs burning. I looked down at my arms. The skin was angry red, blistering rapidly. The pain was a dull roar that was quickly becoming a sharp scream. Jasmine was standing there, safe, checking her makeup in her phone camera. When she saw me, she did not ask if I was okay. She did not call a medic. "You idiot!" she shrieked. Her voice echoed down the hallway, drawing the attention of the guests who were mingling in the ballroom. "You've ruined my live stream! The smoke! The noise! Everyone is going to think we are ghetto!" She stomped over to me. I was still on the floor, cradling my burned arms. "Get up! Hide that hideous burn! Do you want Liam to think we have defective genes?" Then my mother appeared. Renee Vance looked at the smoke billowing from the kitchen doors, then down at me. Her eyes narrowed. She saw the soot on her pristine white marble hallway. "Sophia," she hissed, stepping closer. "Mom, I saved the cake," I whispered, my voice raspy from the smoke. "You saved the cake? You nearly burned the house down! Look at this mess!" Slap. The sound was louder than the fire alarm. My head snapped to the side. The sting on my cheek momentarily distracted me from the agony in my arms. "Clean yourself up," Renee ordered, not a shred of maternal instinct in her body. "And take that cake into the ballroom. If anyone asks, Jasmine baked it. Do you understand?" Jasmine spent all week working on this. Do not you dare steal her spotlight just because you are jealous. Jealous. I looked up at them. Jasmine was already fixing her hair, composing herself. "Yes, jealous," Jasmine sneered. "You are just a baker, Sophia, a low-class, flour-covered nobody. Go find a back door and leave after you drop off the cake." I slowly stood up. My legs were shaking. I picked up the cake again. The pain was blinding now, but I locked it away. I had practiced this stoicism for 30 years. I walked into the ballroom. The room went silent. I must have looked like a specter. A woman in a singed apron, hair wild with static and soot, carrying the most beautiful cake anyone had ever seen. Jasmine ran ahead of me, clapping her hands. "Here it is, everyone! So sorry about the little smoke scare in the kitchen. I insisted on finishing the glazing myself and, well, things got a little heated. But art requires sacrifice, right?" The guests chuckled politely. They applauded her. They looked right through me as I set the cake down on the center table. "Oh, it is magnificent, Jasmine," someone said. "You have such talent." Thank you," Jasmine beamed, clinging to my mother's arm. "It is a family recipe." I turned to leave. I needed cold water. I needed to get away from these vampires before I screamed. That is when the double doors at the far end of the room opened. Liam Sterling walked in. He was different from the photos. The magazines made him look polished, approachable. In person, he was terrifying. He had the energy of a predator who had not eaten in days. He was 35, wearing a bespoke suit that cost more than my entire bakery. He did not smile. "Liam, darling, Jasmine cried out, rushing toward him, her arms open. "I was so worried. I was in the kitchen baking for you and—" Liam did not break his stride. He did not even blink. He swerved around Jasmine as if she were a piece of furniture. He walked straight toward the cake. The room held its breath. Jasmine froze, her smile faltering. My mother took a nervous step forward. Liam stopped. He leaned in close to the cake, examining the sugar orchids. He took a deep breath, smelling the caramelized vanilla. Then he turned. He was looking at me. I was trying to shrink into the shadows, clutching my burned arms to my chest. I looked like a disaster. Wait. Liam's voice was deep, commanding. It cut through the murmurs of the crowd. I stopped. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Did you make this?" he asked, pointing at the cake. Jasmine laughed nervously, running to his side. "Oh, Liam, don't be silly. That is just Sophia. She is the help. She just carried it out for me."
"I told you Quiet," Liam said.
He did not shout, but the authority in his tone made Jasmine snap her mouth shut. He walked over to me. He was tall, towering over me. He looked down at my hands. He saw the angry red blisters rising on my skin. He saw the soot on my face. And then he looked into my eyes. The glazing technique. He said softly so only I could hear. The use of pectin instead of gelatin to maintain the shine under heat. The sugar pulled at exactly 310 degrees. I stared at him. How did he know that? That was my secret, my signature. "Who are you?" he asked. I am Sophia," I stammered. "No." He shook his head slowly. "I do not mean your name. I mean, who are you, really? Because I have tasted every dessert in New York, Paris, and Tokyo, and I have been trying to find the person who understands the chemistry of sugar like this for 6 months." He reached out, his hand hovering near my burned arm, not touching, but offering protection. I stepped back, terrified. My mother was glaring at me, her eyes promising punishment if I spoke the truth. Jasmine looked like she was about to faint. I am nobody," I whispered. "Just a baker." Liam smiled. It was a small, dangerous smile. "I do not think so, Sophia. I think you are the reason I am here." He turned back to the crowd, back to Jasmine, who was trembling with rage and confusion. "Jasmine," Liam said, his voice cold as ice, "you told me you baked this cake. You told me you spent the last 3 days in the kitchen perfecting the passion fruit reduction." Yes, of course I did," Jasmine lied, her voice high and pitchy. Liam reached into his pocket and pulled out a handkerchief. He gently took my hand, wrapping the cool silk around my burned wrist. "Then tell me, Jasmine," he said, not looking at her. "Why are this woman's hands burned from a sugar fire, while your hands smell like Chanel No. 5 and hand sanitizer?" The silence in the room was deafening. My mother gasped. Jasmine's mouth opened and closed like a fish. I looked at Liam. For the first time in my life, someone saw me. Not the servant, not the scapegoat, but me. And that was the moment I knew. This was not just an engagement party. This was a war zone, and I had just been handed a weapon. Jasmine's laugh was like shattering glass, sharp and artificial. She physically wedged herself between Liam and me, her manicured hand gripping his bicep as if she were staking a claim on a piece of property. "Liam, baby, you are confusing the poor girl. Look at her. She is terrified." She turned her gaze on me, her eyes hard and warning, though her lips were curved into a sweet, pitiful smile. Sophia is just my assistant, Liam. She washes the mixing bowls and preps the baking trays. I let her carry the cake out because, well, look at my dress. I could not risk getting fondant on $50,000 worth of custom silk. My heart hammered against my ribs. The lie was so bold, so effortless. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him that Jasmine did not know the difference between baking powder and baking soda. I wanted to tell him that she had spent the entire week getting spray tans and facials while I slaved over a hot oven until my fingers cramped. But I couldn't. My mother, Renee, had moved closer. She stood just behind Liam, her eyes boring into mine. It was a look I knew well. It was the look that meant punishment. It was the look that had silenced me for 30 years. Liam did not move away from Jasmine, but he did not look at her either. His eyes were still fixed on me, searching for something. He looked at the burn on my arm, then at the intricate sugar orchids on the cake, and finally at Jasmine's perfectly manicured, unblemished hands. "Is that so?" Liam asked, his voice neutral. He took a step back, creating space. "So, Jasmine, you are telling me that you understand the precise chemistry required to stabilize a passion fruit reduction at high heat?" Jasmine blinked. For a second, panic flickered behind her false eyelashes. She had no idea what he was talking about. But she recovered quickly, tossing her hair over her shoulder. "Of course, darling. It is a family secret. A little bit of magic and a lot of love. Right, Mom?" "Right," Renee chimed in smoothly, stepping forward to place a hand on Jasmine's shoulder. "Jasmine has always had a gift. She is the artist of the family. Sophia just helps out with the heavy lifting." Liam nodded slowly. He slipped his hands into his pockets, his demeanor shifting from curious to strictly business. The transformation was instant. He was no longer the fiancé. He was the CEO of a global empire. "Well then, this changes things," Liam said. "What do you mean?" Jasmine asked, her smile faltering slightly. Liam gestured to the cake. "The board of directors at Sterling Hotels has been looking for a new executive partner. We want to revamp our entire dessert menu across 500 locations worldwide. We need a signature taste, something that screams luxury and innovation." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the room. "I have been interviewing Michelin star chefs for months, but none of them have impressed me. This cake, however, this is exactly what we are looking for." Jasmine's eyes widened. My mother actually stopped breathing for a second. "I am prepared to offer you a contract, Jasmine," Liam continued. "An exclusive partnership. $15 million for 5 years. $15 million. The number hung in the air like a guillotine blade. I felt the blood drain from my face. That kind of money could change everything. It could save Grandma's oven. It could fix the roof that leaked every time it rained. It could pay off the debts my mother had secretly racked up in my father's name. Jasmine let out a squeal that was entirely undignified. $15 million? Oh, Liam, that is amazing. Of course, I accept. Not so fast. Liam held up a hand. I do not sign contracts based on one cake. I need to be sure. Next Friday, I want you to present a full tasting menu to the board, 12 courses, high concept. If you can replicate the quality of this cake, the contract is yours. Next Friday? Jasmine's voice cracked. That is only 5 days away. Is that a problem? Liam raised an eyebrow. For a culinary genius like you, surely 5 days is plenty of time. No, no problem at all, Jasmine lied, her desperation seeping through. I will dazzle them, you will see. Good. Liam checked his watch. He glanced at me one last time, a strange, unreadable expression on his face. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd of wealthy guests. As soon as he was gone, the air in the room shifted. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. The smile vanished from Jasmine's face instantly. She grabbed my uninjured arm and dug her nails in. You need to fix this, she hissed. We are not discussing this here, my mother interrupted, her voice low and dangerous. She grabbed my other arm, right over the fresh burn. I gasped in pain, but she did not let go. She marched me out of the ballroom, through the service doors, and into the small, soundproof pantry off the main kitchen. She shoved me inside. I stumbled, hitting my hip against a metal shelf. Jasmine followed, slamming the door and locking it. Are you insane? Jasmine screamed at me. Why did you just stand there looking like a kicked puppy? You almost blew my cover. Me? I asked, incredulous. I stared at them, the pain in my arm throbbing in rhythm with my heartbeat. You just accepted a $15 million contract for a job you cannot do. You cannot even bake a brownie from a box mix without burning it, Jasmine. How are you going to present a 12-course tasting menu in 5 days? That is not my problem, Jasmine snapped. That is your problem. My problem? I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. No, absolutely not. I am done. I am done being your shadow. I am done letting you take credit for my work. You want that contract? You bake for it. I turned to the door, my hand reaching for the handle. If you walk out that door, Sophia, you will never step foot in Grandma's oven again. My mother's voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. I froze. I turned back slowly. What did you say? Renee pulled a folded document from her clutch. She unfolded it slowly, smoothing out the creases on top of a stack of canned tomatoes. It was a deed. The deed to the building that housed my bakery, my sanctuary, the only place in the world where I felt safe, the place my grandmother left me. You seem to forget, Sophia, my mother said, tapping a manicured nail on the paper. When Grandma died, she didn't leave the building to you. She left it to the family trust. And as the executor of the trust, I have the power to sell any assets I deem unprofitable. You wouldn't, I whispered. Grandma built that place with her bare hands. It was her legacy. Legacy doesn't pay for my country club membership, Renee sneered. I have a buyer lined up, Sophia, a developer. He wants to tear it down and build a parking lot for the new shopping center next door. He is offering cash. I can sign the papers tomorrow morning. Tears welled in my eyes, not from sadness, but from pure, white-hot rage. That bakery was my life. It was the only memory I had of the one person who had ever loved me unconditionally. You are a monster, I said, my voice shaking. I am a pragmatist, Renee shrugged. Here's the deal. You are going to go back to that kitchen. You are going to design the most spectacular tasting menu Atlanta has ever seen. You are going to bake day and night until your fingers bleed if you have to. And Jasmine is going to present it. And if I refuse? I asked. Then I sell the building at 9 a.m. tomorrow, Renee said. And not only that, I will make sure every bank in the city knows you are a liability. You will never get a loan to start over. You will be on the street, Sophia, with nothing but your flour and your pride." I looked at Jasmine. She was smirking, checking her reflection in the back of a spoon. She knew she had won. She always won. I looked at my mother. Her face was stone. She meant every word. I felt trapped. The walls of the pantry felt like they were closing in on me. I thought about Liam. I thought about the way he looked at me. He suspected something, but suspicion wasn't proof. If I spoke up now, I would lose everything. If I played along, I would be a slave, but at least I would still have my home. "Fine," I said, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "Good choice," Renee smiled, putting the deed back in her bag. "Now get back to work. Jasmine needs to look busy for her Instagram stories. And Sophia, put some foundation on that arm. The burn is disgusting. It is ruining the aesthetic." They unlocked the door and walked out, leaving me alone in the dark pantry. I slid down the wall until I hit the floor. I buried my face in my hands, but I did not cry. Crying was a luxury I could not afford. I had 5 days to create a $15 million lie. But as I sat there, listening to the muffled sounds of the party outside, a cold resolve settled in my chest. They thought they had broken me. They thought they owned me. But they forgot one thing. When you play with fire, eventually you get burned. And I was the one holding the matches. I stood up, wiped the soot from my face, and walked back into the kitchen. The game was on. The morning sun was barely peeking through the blinds when the doorbell rang. It was not a polite, social ring. It was authoritative. My mother, Renee, froze mid-sip of her coffee. She looked at the security monitor and her face went pale. "It is Liam," she hissed. "Why is he here at 7 in the morning?" Panic instantly turned the kitchen into a war zone. Jasmine was still in her silk robe, scrolling through TikTok, her face devoid of makeup. I was already covered in flour, having been awake for 20 hours straight, trying to salvage the brioche disaster from the night before. "Hide everything," Renee barked at me. "Get those dirty bowls out of sight. Jasmine, go put on a face. Now!" Jasmine scrambled off the stool, nearly tripping over her own feet. "What does he want? He said the tasting was Friday. I am not ready. I do not know what to say to him." My mother grabbed my arm, her nails digging into the fresh bandages. You are going to tell her what to say." She pulled a tiny, flesh-colored Bluetooth earpiece from her purse. It was the kind actors use on set. She shoved it into Jasmine's ear as she ran past and tossed the matching transmitter to me. "Get in the pantry," Renee ordered me. "If he asks a question Jasmine cannot answer, you feed it to her. If you mess this up, Sophia, I swear I will sign that deed over to the developer before lunch." I retreated into the narrow pantry, the smell of dried oregano and stale crackers filling my nose. I cracked the door just a sliver, enough to see the kitchen island, but not enough to be seen. I put the earpiece in. The static hiss was deafening in the small space. Liam walked in a moment later. He looked fresh, sharp, wearing a navy suit that made him look like he owned the oxygen in the room. He did not look like a man in love. He looked like an auditor. "Good morning," Liam said, his voice smooth but cold. Jasmine breezed back in, now wearing a casual but expensive cashmere lounge set. She had managed to apply lip gloss and concealer in record time. "Liam, darling, what a surprise. I was just meditating on the menu." "Meditating," Liam repeated, walking over to the marble island where I had left a tray of experimental tart shells. I hope you are meditating on the structural integrity of your pastry cream. I was looking over the preliminary sketches you sent, or rather the ones your mother emailed me. They were Jasmine's ideas, of course. Renee interjected quickly, pouring Liam a cup of coffee with a shaking hand. Right. Liam picked up a tart shell. He examined it with the scrutiny of a jeweler. I wanted to ask you about the caramelization technique for the croquembouche tower. In your notes, you mentioned a wet caramel method. Silence. I pressed the button on my transmitter. Tell him wet caramel crystallizes less, but takes longer to cook. Whisper it. Jasmine touched her ear nervously. Oh, well, wet caramel crystallizes less, but it, takes longer to cook. Liam nodded. Correct. But at what temperature do you stop the cooking process to ensure it doesn't become bitter amber? I whispered into the mic. 335 degrees Fahrenheit. Immediate ice bath. 335 degrees, Jasmine parroted, her smile tight. And then an immediate ice bath, obviously. Liam stared at her. He took a bite of the tart shell. The crunch echoed in the silent kitchen. Very precise. Most people pull it at 350, but that is too dark for my taste. Good answer. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. It was working. We were pulling off the impossible. Then, static. A high-pitched whine erupted in my ear. I winced, tearing the earpiece out for a second. The connection was failing. The thick walls of the pantry were interfering with the signal. I jammed it back in, desperate to hear. And for the mousse? Liam was asking. I assume you are using gelatin sheets? I pressed the button. Powdered gelatin, bloom strength, 160. Tell him sheets are too inconsistent for this humidity. Sophia? Sophia, I can't hear you. Jasmine's voice came through the feed, not meant for Liam, but she had mumbled it aloud. I panicked. I pressed the button harder. Powdered gelatin, 160, bloom. Say it. Jasmine looked at Liam, sweat beading on her forehead. Sheets? No, wait. Powder. Yes, powder. Because of the humidity? Liam raised an eyebrow. Humidity affects gelatin? That is a new theory. My heart stopped. Technically, humidity affected the meringue folded into the mousse, not the gelatin itself directly in the way I had phrased it quickly. I had simplified it too much, and Jasmine had delivered it clumsily. I mean, the meringue, Jasmine corrected herself quickly, seeing his expression. The humidity collapses the egg whites. Recovered, barely. Liam walked around the island. He was circling her like a shark. He stopped right in front of the pantry door. I held my breath. I could see the back of his expensive leather shoes through the crack. If he opened this door, he would find me sitting on a crate of onions with a transmitter in my hand. You know, Jasmine. Liam said, leaning back against the counter, crossing his arms. I have always admired chefs who understand the science. It is rare. Most people just follow a recipe. But to understand the why, that is talent. Thank you, Jasmine breathed, thinking she was in the clear. Let me ask you one last thing, Liam said, his tone casual, almost conversational. It is about the lemon curd filling for the third course. I strained to hear. The static was getting worse. I noticed you are using heavy cream in the curd, Liam continued. To prevent the acidity of the lemon juice from curdling the mixture, you are heating the cream to a boil before adding the citrus, right? I froze. No, that was wrong. That was dead wrong. If you boil cream and add lemon juice, you make ricotta cheese. It curdles instantly. You have to temper the eggs and butter, adding the juice slowly at a lower temperature. I slammed my finger on the button. No. Tell him no. That will curdle it. You never boil the cream with acid. Jasmine, say no. I waited. All I heard was static, a long, screeching feedback loop. My battery light flickered red. The transmitter was dead. I tapped it frantically. Nothing. Jasmine stood there. She looked at the pantry door, her eyes wide with terror. She waited for my voice. She tapped her ear discreetly. Nothing. She had to guess. She looked at Liam. He was smiling at her, an encouraging, warm smile. A trap. Yes, Jasmine said, her voice confident now that she thought she had the answer. Absolutely. I boil the cream first. It stabilizes the proteins. That is the secret to a smooth curd. Time seemed to stop. My mother dropped a teaspoon. It clattered loudly against the saucer. Liam's smile did not waver, but his eyes changed. The warmth evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp amusement. He stood up straight, brushing a speck of imaginary dust from his lapel. Interesting, he said softly. I have never heard of that technique. Usually that makes cheese. But I suppose you have your own special methods. He looked at the pantry door one last time. He knew. He absolutely knew. Well, I look forward to tasting that boiled cream curd on Friday, Liam said. Good luck, Jasmine. You are going to need it. He walked out. The front door clicked shut. Jasmine let out a scream and threw a ceramic bowl across the room. It shattered against the wall next to the pantry. What happened? She shrieked. You went silent. You made me look like an idiot. I stepped out of the pantry. I was shaking, but not from fear. From realization. He knows, I said. He does not know anything, my mother snapped, though her hands were trembling as she picked up the broken china. He was just impressed. You heard him. He said it was interesting. He was mocking her, I said. He baited her with a wrong fact, and she walked right into it. Shut up, Jasmine yelled. Just fix it. Make the curd his way if that is what he wants. Just make sure it tastes good. I looked at them. They were deluding themselves. They thought they could still manipulate this situation. But I had seen Liam's face. He wasn't looking for a chef anymore. He was looking for a liar. And he had just found 2 of them. And me? I was just the ghost in the pantry. But ghosts have a way of haunting the people who try to bury them. I picked up the transmitter and dropped it into the trash. I will make the curd, I said quietly. But I am not making it his way, or your way. I am making it my way. Because on Friday, when that curd hits his tongue, I wanted there to be no doubt left in his mind about who really stood in this kitchen. The trap was set. Now, we just had to wait for the snap. The silence in the house was heavy, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the rhythmic thumping of my own heart. It was 3 a.m. My mother was asleep in the master suite, dreaming of the social status she would gain from this wedding. Jasmine was in her room, likely wearing a silk eye mask, protecting the beauty she believed was her only currency. I was still on the pantry floor where my mother had left me, but I was no longer unconscious. The brief blackout had reset something in my brain. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating clarity. I knew what I had to do. I pushed myself up, biting the inside of my cheek to stifle a groan as my burned arm protested the movement. I did not change out of my flour-covered clothes. I did not wash the soot from my face. I needed to look like the victim one last time. I grabbed my backpack, checking for the folder I had hidden inside the lining months ago. It was still there. I crept out the back door, moving like a shadow through the house I had cleaned but never owned. The night air was cool, a sharp contrast to the suffocating heat of the kitchen. My car, a beat-up sedan with peeling paint and a rattling engine, was parked down the street. It was my only possession, the only thing my name was actually on. I got in and drove, my hands gripping the wheel tight enough to make my knuckles white. I was not going to the bakery. I was going to the one place my family would never think to look for me. Downtown Atlanta was quiet at this hour, the skyscrapers looming like glass giants against the dark sky. I pulled up to a 24-hour diner, but I didn't go in for coffee. I waited in the parking lot until the sun began to bleed over the horizon. At 7 sharp, I drove 2 blocks over to a sleek office building that housed the firm of Davis and Associates. Mr. Davis was an intellectual property lawyer I had met years ago when he bought a birthday cake for his daughter. He had told me then that my recipes were unique, that I should protect them. I had laughed it off back then. I wasn't laughing now. I walked into the lobby. The security guard looked at my messy apron and burned arm with suspicion, but I flashed my ID and told him I had an appointment. I didn't, but Mr. Davis was an early riser. When I walked into his office, he was already at his desk, sipping espresso. He looked up, his eyes widening as he took in my appearance. Sophia. He stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. You look like you just walked out of a war zone. What happened? I did not have time for small talk. I sat down, wincing as my arm brushed the leather chair. I pulled the folder from my bag and slid it across the polished mahogany desk. I need you to execute the final stage of the Phoenix Protocol, I said, my voice steady. Mr. Davis opened the folder. He scanned the documents, his eyebrows rising. These are the patent filings for the chemical composition of your edible glass and the structural sponge technique. You filed the provisionals 6 months ago under the shell company Phoenix Culinary Solutions. Yes, I said. And today, I want to convert them to full utility patents. I also want to trademark the name The Ghost Alchemist. He looked at me over his glasses. Sophia, you know what this means. If you do this, and your sister uses these formulas for the Sterling contract, she will be committing federal intellectual property theft. The penalties are severe. I know, I said. That is the point. But the fees? Mr. Davis hesitated. To expedite this, to lock it down before Friday, it is going to cost $5,000, up front. I nodded. I expected that. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the street where my car was parked. It was the car I drove to culinary school. It was the car I slept in when my mother kicked me out for a week because I forgot to buy milk. It was my freedom. Give me an hour, I said. I left the office and drove to a used car dealership on the outskirts of the city. The sign said, "We buy any car, cash in hand." The dealer, a greasy man with a stain on his tie, looked at my car and then at me. He smelled desperation. $500, he said, kicking the tire. It is worth $2,000, I argued, though I had no fight left in me. Look at you, sweetheart, he sneered. You are in no position to negotiate. Take it or leave it. I did not have time to argue. I drove to 3 more lots until I found one that offered me exactly $5,000. I signed the title over. I handed him the keys. As I watched him drive my car into the back lot, I felt a piece of my soul detach. I was now completely trapped. No vehicle, no escape route. If this plan failed, I would be walking the streets. I took a taxi back to the law firm. I handed Mr. Davis the envelope of thick, greasy bills. "File it," I said. He counted the money. He looked at me with a new kind of respect. He didn't see a victim anymore. He saw a strategist. "It is done," he said, typing furiously on his keyboard. "As of this moment, Phoenix Culinary Solutions owns every single recipe you have ever written. If anyone else claims them, we sue." "Thank you," I said. I left the building feeling lighter, despite the pain in my arm. I had nothing left to lose, which meant I was dangerous. I took the bus back to the suburbs, walking the last mile to the house. The sun was high now. The neighborhood was awake. Lawn mowers were buzzing, birds were singing. It was a perfect facade of a morning. I walked up the driveway. My mother's car was gone. She was probably at the florist. That meant Jasmine was alone. I unlocked the front door and stepped into the cool hallway. It was quiet. Too quiet. I walked toward the kitchen. I needed to get back to the dough before it overproofed. I needed to pretend that I had just been out for a walk. But as I rounded the corner into the living room, I stopped. Jasmine was sitting on the white leather sofa. She was not wearing her silk robe. She was wearing jeans and a tank top. Her hair was pulled back tight, and across her lap, resting casually on her knees, was a metal baseball bat. She didn't look up when I entered. She just stared at the blank television screen. "Where were you?" she asked. Her voice was low, devoid of the usual whining tone. It was the voice of someone who sensed a threat. I went to the pharmacy," I lied. "For my arm." She turned her head slowly to look at me. Her eyes were bloodshot. She hadn't slept either. Liar. She stood up, the bat dragging against the floor with a metallic scrape. "I checked the pharmacy. They haven't seen you. And Mom checked the garage. Your car is gone." She took a step toward me, raising the bat slightly. "You went to see him, didn't you?" she accused, her voice rising to a shriek. "You went to see Liam. You went to tell him the truth. You went to sell me out to get your little revenge." "No, Jasmine." I backed up, my hands raising instinctively. "I didn't see Liam. I swear." "Don't lie to me!" She swung the bat, smashing a vase on the side table. Shattered porcelain flew across the room. "You are jealous. You have always been jealous. You want his money. You want my life. Well, you are not going to ruin this for me, Sophia. I will not let you." She advanced on me, the bat raised high. "Where is the money, Sophia?" she screamed. "You sold the car. I saw the title transfer notification on the family insurance app. You have cash. You are planning to run away, aren't you? You are going to leave me here with this menu I cannot cook." I hit the wall. There was nowhere left to run. "I am not running," I said, staring at the bat, realizing that for the first time, my sister wasn't just a brat. She was unhinged. "Good." She smiled, a terrified, manic grin. "Because you are not going anywhere until that tasting is done. And if you try to leave this house again, I won't just break your arm. I will break your hands so you can never bake again." She swung the bat into the wall next to my head, the drywall exploding in a cloud of white dust. "Now get in the kitchen," she whispered. "We have a contract to win." I looked at the hole in the wall. I looked at her. She thought she had trapped me. She thought fear would keep me in line. She didn't know that she had just threatened the owner of Phoenix Culinary Solutions. She didn't know that with every threat, she was just adding another zero to the settlement I would eventually extract from her. I walked past her, brushing the drywall dust off my shoulder. "Fine," I said without looking back. "Let's bake." Back in the kitchen, the air was thick with tension and the smell of caramelized sugar. I had been awake for nearly 40 hours.
My body was running on adrenaline and hatred. The new batch of brioche was rising, and I was in the middle of tempering a massive slab of dark chocolate for the centerpieces. Jasmine was pacing back and forth, rehearsing the lies I had written for her on index cards. She looked perfect, of course. Her hair was blown out, her makeup was flawless, but her eyes were darting around like a trapped animal. Then the intercom buzzed. "He is here." My mother's voice crackled from the living room monitor. "Liam just pulled through the gate. He is 2 hours early." The color drained from Jasmine's face. "Early? He cannot be early. The chocolate isn't set. The kitchen is a mess. And her," she pointed a shaking finger at me, "she is still here." I looked down at my apron. It was stiff with dried dough and chocolate stains. My bandages were gray with soot and grime. I looked like exactly what I was, the person doing all the work. "Get out," Jasmine hissed, grabbing my arm. "You need to disappear. Now." "I cannot leave," I argued, pulling away. "The chocolate is at 88 degrees. If I stop stirring now, it will bloom. It will look like chalk." "I do not care about the chocolate," Jasmine shrieked. "If Liam sees you looking like a zombie in my kitchen, he is going to ask questions. He is already suspicious, Sophia. You need to vanish." She looked around frantically. The pantry was too obvious. He had almost caught me there last time. The back door was locked and the key was in my mother's purse. There was nowhere to go. Then, her eyes landed on the heavy stainless steel door in the corner. The walk-in freezer. "In there," she commanded. "Are you crazy?" I stepped back. "It is minus 18 degrees in there, Jasmine. I am wearing a t-shirt." "It is just for 10 minutes, she lied, grabbing my shoulders and shoving me toward the heavy door. "Just until I get him settled in the living room with a drink. Then you can sneak out the back." "No!" I planted my feet. "I am not going in there." My mother rushed into the kitchen then. Why is she still here? Liam is parking the car. She is refusing to hide. Jasmine cried, playing the victim instantly. "She wants to ruin it, Mom." Renee did not hesitate. She grabbed a heavy rolling pin from the counter. Her eyes were cold, devoid of any recognition that I was her daughter. "Get in the freezer, Sophia, or so help me God, I will break your fingers myself and tell Liam you dropped a heavy box on them. You will never bake again." I looked at the rolling pin. I looked at the hatred in their eyes. They would do it. They were desperate enough to do it. "Fine," I whispered. I walked to the freezer. I pulled the heavy handle. A blast of Arctic air hit me, instantly chilling the sweat on my skin. I stepped inside the metal box, surrounded by shelves of frozen berries, blocks of butter, and hanging sides of meat. "Just 10 minutes," Jasmine promised. She slammed the door shut. Darkness swallowed me. The only light came from the small, glowing red numbers on the temperature gauge above the door. Minus 18 Celsius, 0 degrees Fahrenheit. I heard the heavy click of the latch engaging from the outside. "Wait." I spun around. I pushed on the safety release handle. It didn't move. The safety release inside our freezer had been broken for years. We used a padlock hasp on the outside to keep it shut tight because the seal was old.
Jasmine knew that. She had locked it. "Jasmine!" I pounded on the door. "Open this! The handle is broken!" Silence. I pressed my ear to the cold steel. I could hear muffled voices. The front door opening. Liam's deep baritone. Jasmine's high-pitched, fake laugh. They were not coming back in 10 minutes. The cold was not a slow creep. It was an assault. Within seconds, the sweat on my forehead turned to ice. My wet apron froze stiff, becoming a board against my chest. But the worst pain was in my arms. The burns, which had been throbbing with heat for days, suddenly screamed as the extreme cold hit the raw nerve endings. It felt like someone was flaying the skin off my bones all over again. I wrapped my arms around myself, shivering violently. My teeth began to chatter so hard I thought they would crack. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The cold began to sink deeper. It moved past my skin and into my muscles. My fingers started to feel numb, stiff, and clumsy. I tried to wiggle my toes in my thin canvas sneakers, but I could barely feel them. I have to move, I told myself. If I stop moving, I die. I started doing jumping jacks in the tiny space between the racks of frozen puree. 1, 2, 3. My lungs burned with every breath of the razor-sharp air. The condensation from my breath crystallized instantly on my eyelashes, sealing them shut every time I blinked. 30 minutes. 40 minutes. My movements became sluggish. The shivering stopped. That was bad. I knew enough biology to know that when you stop shivering, hypothermia is setting in. Your body is giving up. I sank to the floor, pulling my knees to my chest. The metal floor sucked the heat right out of my legs. I felt sleepy. A heavy, seductive drowsiness washed over me. It would be so easy to just close my eyes, to just let go. No more baking, no more shouting, no more pain. I thought about the deed to the bakery. I thought about Mr. Davis and the patent filings. I thought about the phoenix. "You cannot die here," I whispered to the darkness. "A phoenix rises from fire, not ice." I forced myself up. I grabbed a heavy frozen leg of lamb from the hook. I swung it against the metal wall. Clang! The sound was dull, absorbed by the insulation. I swung it again, harder. Clang! I screamed. Not words, just a primal sound of rage. I pounded on the door with my frozen fists until the skin on my knuckles split. Outside, in the warm, fragrant kitchen, the sound must have been faint, a rhythmic thumping, like a heartbeat in the walls. Liam was standing at the kitchen island, inspecting the chocolate tempering machine I had abandoned. "This chocolate is starting to bloom," he noted, running a finger through the mixture. "It was perfect 20 minutes ago. Why did you stop stirring?" Jasmine was leaning against the counter, blocking his view of the freezer. "Oh, I got distracted when you arrived. I was just so excited to see you." Liam frowned. He tilted his head. "Do you hear that?" he asked. Jasmine's heart stopped. "Hear what?" "That thumping sound." Liam walked toward the back of the kitchen. "It sounds like it is coming from the pantry, or the freezer." Jasmine stepped in front of him, panic flaring in her chest. "It is nothing. It is just the ice maker. It is old. It makes terrible noises. We are getting it replaced next week." Thump, thump, thump. It was louder now, more desperate. "That does not sound like an ice maker," Liam said, his eyes narrowing. "That sounds like someone is inside." He reached for the freezer handle. Jasmine did the only thing she could think of, the only weapon she had left. She threw herself at him. She grabbed the lapels of his expensive jacket and pulled him down, smashing her lips against his. It was a desperate, aggressive kiss. She pressed her body against his, trying to force him back against the island, away from the door that hid her dying sister. "Liam!" She moaned against his mouth, her hands tangling in his hair. "I have missed you so much. Forget the chocolate, forget the kitchen. Take me right now, right here on the counter." She ground her hips against him, desperate to distract him, desperate to drown out the sound of my fists beating against the steel. But inside the freezer, I had nothing left. The heavy leg of lamb slipped from my numb fingers. My legs gave out. I slid down the door, leaving a streak of frost where my breath had hit the metal. The darkness was closing in, and the last thing I heard before the blackness took me was the sound of the latch not moving. Liam did not melt into the kiss. He did not wrap his arms around Jasmine or lose himself in the moment. Instead, he stood like a statue, his body rigid and unyielding against her desperate embrace. He placed his hands on her shoulders and firmly, deliberately, pushed her back. "Not now, Jasmine," he said. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it that cut through the humid air of the kitchen. Jasmine stumbled back slightly, her chest heaving, her lipstick smeared. She looked up at him with wide, fearful eyes, trying to gauge if her distraction had worked. "But Liam, I missed you," she stammered, reaching for his hand again. "I am sure you did," Liam said, stepping around her. "But I am thirsty, and this ice maker seems to be causing quite a commotion. Let me take a look at it." "No!" Jasmine practically shrieked, jumping in front of him again. "Do not worry about it. I will get you a drink from the fridge. The ice maker is broken. It is leaking. You will ruin your shoes." Liam looked down at his shoes, then back at the heavy steel door of the walk-in freezer. The thumping had stopped. The silence was more terrifying than the noise. "Move, Jasmine," Liam said. It was not a request, it was a command. Jasmine froze. She had never heard him use that tone before. It was the tone he used in boardrooms right before he fired someone. She stepped aside, defeated, her hands trembling by her sides. Liam walked to the freezer. He gripped the heavy metal handle. He noticed the latch immediately. It was not stuck. It was not broken. It was locked from the outside. He didn't say a word. He just flipped the latch and hauled the door open. A cloud of white mist rolled out, heavy and cold, instantly dropping the temperature in the kitchen. As the fog cleared, Liam saw me. I was slumped against a shelf of frozen vegetables, my knees pulled to my chest, my head resting on my arms. My skin was a terrifying shade of pale blue. Ice crystals had formed on my eyelashes and in my hair. I was shaking so violently that my teeth were clicking together in a rhythmic, skeletal sound. "Sophia!" Liam dropped to his knees. The expensive fabric of his suit pants hit the dirty kitchen floor, but he didn't care. He reached out and touched my face. His hand felt like fire against my frozen skin. I blinked slowly, trying to focus. My vision was blurry. I thought I was hallucinating. I thought he was an angel coming to take me away. "Liam?" I whispered. My voice was barely a croak. "Oh my God," Jasmine said from the doorway, her voice thick with fake shock. "Sophia? What are you doing in there? I thought you went home hours ago." Liam did not look at her. He did not acknowledge her bad acting. He was busy unbuttoning his suit jacket. He stripped it off in one fluid motion and wrapped it around my shoulders. The silk lining was still warm from his body heat, and the scent of sandalwood and expensive cologne enveloped me, masking the smell of raw meat and freezer burn. He rubbed my arms vigorously, trying to generate friction, trying to bring the blood back to my surface. "You are freezing," he murmured, his eyes scanning my face with intense focus. "Can you stand?" I think so," I chattered. He helped me up. My legs felt like wooden stumps. I stumbled and he caught me, pulling me against his chest to steady me. For a moment, I just breathed in his warmth, feeling the solid, safe beat of his heart against my ear. He guided me out of the freezer and into the kitchen. The heat of the room hit me like a physical wall, making my skin prickle and burn as the blood rushed back into my capillaries. Jasmine was wringing her hands, her eyes darting between us. "She must have gone in to check inventory and the door jammed," Jasmine babbled, her voice high and frantic. "That old latch is so tricky. I told Mom we needed to fix it." "Sophia, why didn't you call out? We were right here." Liam sat me down on a stool. He kept his arm around my shoulders, anchoring me. Then, slowly, he turned to look at Jasmine. "The door was latched from the outside, Jasmine," he said. Jasmine went pale. It was?" She laughed nervously. "Oh, silly me. I must have bumped it when I was cleaning earlier. I had no idea she was in there. Thank God you found her, Liam." Liam stared at her. His expression was unreadable. It was a mask of perfect, polite indifference. But I saw his hand. The hand that was resting on the counter was clenched into a fist so tight his knuckles were white. "Accidents happen," Liam said smoothly. "But you should really be more careful with your staff. Good help is hard to find." He turned back to me. He leaned in close, pretending to adjust the jacket around my shoulders. His face was inches from mine. Jasmine couldn't see his lips moving from where she stood. "Listen to me," he whispered, his voice a low rumble that only I could hear. "I know she locked you in there. I know she is lying about the cake. I know everything." My eyes widened. I opened my mouth to speak, to confess, to beg him to take me away. "Shh," he breathed. "Do not say a word, not yet. She has a contract to sign on Friday. If we expose her now, she walks away with nothing but a bruised ego. But if we wait, if we let her walk into that boardroom and present that menu, she loses everything." He pulled back slightly, looking me in the eye. "Can you do it? Can you survive 2 more days?" I looked at him. I saw the cold fury in his eyes. It matched the fire in my own belly. He wasn't just saving me. He was offering me a partnership. I nodded. Just a tiny, imperceptible movement. "Good," he said aloud, standing up and brushing off his knees. "Well, Sophia seems to be thawing out. You should get her some hot tea, Jasmine." Jasmine rushed to the kettle, eager to look useful, eager to escape his gaze. "Of course, right away. I am so sorry, Sophia." Liam checked his watch. "I have to go. I have a meeting with the board to finalize the paperwork for the tasting. I just wanted to drop by and see how the creative process was going." He walked toward the door, but paused at the kitchen island. He reached into his pocket. "I almost forgot," he said. "I need to leave a deposit for the ingredients." He pulled out a checkbook, scribbled something, and tore it off. He placed it on the counter, right next to the stand mixer. But as he did, his hand lingered for a second behind the flour jar. It was a sleight of hand so smooth, a magician would have missed it. He placed a tiny black cube, no larger than a sugar cube, behind the ceramic jar. The lens was facing directly at the main workspace. "I will see you Friday, Jasmine," Liam called out. Do not disappoint me." He walked out. As soon as the door closed, Jasmine dropped the kettle. She didn't make me tea. She turned on me, her face twisting into a snarl. "You clumsy idiot!" she screamed. "You almost ruined everything! Why were you making so much noise?" I pulled Liam's jacket tighter around me. It was my armor now. "I was dying, Jasmine," I said, my voice steady despite the cold. She scoffed. "You were fine. It was 20 minutes. Stop being dramatic. Now give me that jacket. You are getting his expensive cologne all over your dirty clothes." She reached for it. "No," I said. She stopped, shocked. "What did you say to me?" I said no. I stood up. My legs were still shaking, but I stood tall. "He gave it to me, and I am freezing because you locked me in a freezer. So I am keeping the jacket. And if you try to take it, I will walk out that door right now and I will not come back. And you can explain to the board on Friday why your signature brioche tastes like raw flour and ammonia." Jasmine lowered her hand. She glared at me, hatred radiating from her pores. But she backed down. She knew she needed me. "Fine," she spat. "Keep it. You look ridiculous anyway, like a beggar wearing a king's robe. Now get back to work. We have lost an hour because of your little stunt." I sat back down at the counter, wrapped in Liam's scent. I picked up the whisk. Jasmine went back to scrolling on her phone, oblivious to the tiny black eye watching her from behind the flour jar. She thought she was the director of this show. She thought I was just a prop. She didn't realize the cameras were already rolling, and the final scene was going to be her destruction. I looked at the lens and gave a tiny, almost invisible smile. It was time to bake a masterpiece. I sat there for a long time, wrapping Liam's jacket tighter around my shoulders. The scent of sandalwood and expensive wool was a shield against the sterile cold of the kitchen. My fingers were still stiff, but the feeling was returning, bringing with it a sharp, prickling pain that felt like victory. I watched Jasmine in the reflection of the stainless steel oven door. She was back to being the star of her own imaginary show, humming a tune as she rearranged the fruit bowl for the 10th time, completely unbothered by the fact that she had nearly killed me less than an hour ago. That was the moment the last thread of familial loyalty snapped. For years, I had held on to a childish hope. A hope that if I just worked hard enough, if I just baked enough perfect cakes, if I just stayed quiet enough, my mother would look at me with the same adoration she gave Jasmine. I hoped that Jasmine would remember the nights I stayed up helping her with her homework, or the times I covered for her when she snuck out. But as I looked at her now, I realized that hope was a poison. It had kept me sick. It had kept me weak. I stood up. The movement was slow, deliberate. I wasn't just standing up from a stool. I was standing up from a lifetime of kneeling. "Where are you going?" Jasmine asked without looking up. "To the bathroom," I said, my voice raspy but steady. "Unless you want to lock me in there too?" She rolled her eyes. "Just hurry up. We still have the petit fours to finish." I walked out of the kitchen, down the hallway, and into the small guest bathroom. I locked the door. I turned on the faucet to mask any sound. Then I reached into the inside pocket of Liam's jacket. I wasn't looking for money or a love note. I was looking for a pen. I found a sleek silver fountain pen clipped to the lining. It felt heavy and expensive in my hand. I pulled a stack of index cards from my own pocket. These were the cue cards Jasmine needed for the presentation. She had demanded I write down every ingredient, every technique, every flavor profile so she could memorize them and sound like a genius. I looked at the blank white lines. This was it. This was the weapon. I began to write. For the first course, the lemon tart, I wrote down the ingredients exactly as Jasmine expected. Flour, butter, sugar, lemon zest. But then, for the thickening agent, instead of writing cornstarch, I wrote arrowroot powder. It looked the same, it tasted the same, but arrowroot breaks down when mixed with dairy at high heat. If she followed this instruction, the tart filling would turn into a watery soup the moment she sliced it. For the second course, the chocolate soufflé, I wrote down the temperature as 375 degrees, a perfect temperature for a cake, but death for a soufflé. At that heat, the outside would burn before the inside could rise. It would be a collapsed, charred mess. I wrote faster, my hand flying across the cards. I was not just writing recipes, I was writing a tragedy. A tragedy where Jasmine was the lead actress, and the stage was set for her humiliated exit. I created a second set of documents. These were not on index cards. I pulled a few sheets of folded paper from the back of my waistband. These were the draft contracts I had printed at the library days ago, before the freezer incident. They were agreements transferring ownership of specific recipes to Phoenix Culinary Solutions. I signed them with my own name, dating them for today. I folded them small, tiny squares of legal dynamite and tucked them into the hidden pocket of Liam's jacket. I stared at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes dark with exhaustion, but there was a fire burning in them that hadn't been there before. I looked like a ghost. The ghost alchemist. I washed my face, scrubbing away the last of the soot. I took a deep breath and walked back into the lion's den. Here, I said, tossing the stack of index cards onto the counter in front of Jasmine. The cheat sheets. Memorize them. Jasmine picked them up, flipping through them with a critical eye. Arrowroot, she frowned. I thought you said cornstarch yesterday. I did, I lied smoothly. But I realized that for the quantity we are making, arrowroot gives a clearer sheen. It is more premium. Liam will appreciate the transparency of the gel. She nodded, buying it instantly because it sounded fancy. Good call. See, you can be useful when you try. She tucked the cards into her purse, the purse that would be her undoing. The rest of the day passed in a blur of frantic activity. We baked, we prepped. I did 90% of the work while Jasmine supervised and took photos. My mother came in and out, critiquing the plating, complaining about the smell of burnt sugar, reminding me that my entire future depended on Jasmine's success. By evening, the kitchen was finally quiet. The components were ready, the sauces were reduced, the chocolate was tempered. Everything was staged in the refrigerators, ready for transport to the Sterling headquarters in the morning. I was cleaning the counters, my back to the room, when I heard the sound of a zipper. I turned around. My mother was standing by my backpack, the one I had left on the dining table. She was holding something up. It was a small white rectangle, a business card. Davis and Associates, Intellectual Property Law, Renee read aloud. Her voice was ice cold. I felt a jolt of adrenaline. I had forgotten to throw it away. Why do you have a lawyer's card in your bag, Sophia? Renee asked, walking toward me. Her eyes were dangerous. I found it, I stammered, backing up against the sink. On the bus. I just picked it up to use as a bookmark. Do not lie to me! She slammed her hand on the counter. You went to see him. That is where you went this morning when you sold the car. You are plotting something. No, Mom, I swear I... Give me your phone, she demanded. What? No! I need my phone! Give it to me! She lunged forward, grabbing my apron. She reached into my pocket and yanked my phone out. She unlocked it. I had been careless. I hadn't changed the passcode. She scrolled through my call history. There it was. A call to Davis and Associates at 8 a.m. You little traitor, she whispered. She looked at me with pure disgust. You were going to sue us? Your own family? After everything we have done for you? We put a roof over your head. We let you work here. You use me, I shouted, finally snapping. You treat me like a slave. She slapped me. It was a hard, stinging blow that knocked my head to the side. You are ungrateful trash, just like your father was, she hissed. She walked over to the sink. She turned on the garbage disposal, and then she dropped my phone into it. I screamed as the crunch of metal and glass filled the room. My connection to the outside world. My alarm clock. My only way to call Mr. Davis if things went wrong. Gone. Now, Renee said, turning off the water, you are going to your room. I am locking the door from the outside. You will not eat. You will not sleep. You will sit there and think about your betrayal until we leave for the presentation tomorrow morning. But the tasting, I started. Jasmine can handle the plating, Renee said. We do not need you anymore. You have done the prep. You are a liability, Sophia. She grabbed my arm and dragged me down the hallway. She shoved me into my small bedroom and slammed the door. I heard the click of the lock. I was alone. No phone, no car, no way to contact Liam, no way to warn Mr. Davis. I sat on the edge of my bed. The room was dark. Panic tried to claw its way up my throat. What if I had miscalculated? What if Jasmine actually pulled it off? What if the arrowroot didn't break down? What if Liam decided not to help? I looked at the jacket. I was still wearing it. I buried my face in the collar. Then I remembered the folded papers in the hidden pocket. The contracts. They were safe. My mother hadn't found them. And I remembered something else. The arrowroot wasn't the only trap. I had made the chocolate ganache with a specific ratio of cocoa butter. It was stable at room temperature. But the Sterling boardroom was famous for being kept at a chilly 68 degrees. Under those conditions, that specific ratio would cause the ganache to bloom rapidly, turning from a glossy brown to a dusty, moldy-looking gray within 20 minutes. It was a time bomb. I lay back on the pillow. My cheek stung from the slap. My arm throbbed from the burn. My stomach growled with hunger. Let them lock me up, I thought. Let them take my phone. They cannot take what is in my head. I closed my eyes. I didn't sleep. I visualized the boardroom. I visualized the long mahogany table. I visualized Jasmine standing there, confident, arrogant. I visualized the moment she would slice into that lemon tart. I waited. The night dragged on. I heard them moving around the house. I heard Jasmine rehearsing her speech. I am so honored to present this menu, inspired by my grandmother. Passion, dedication. Lies. All lies. Morning came. The sun filtered through the cracks in my blinds. The lock clicked. The door opened. My mother stood there. She was dressed in a sharp navy suit, looking every bit the matriarch of a successful family. "Get up," she said. I stood up. "Go wash your face. Put on something decent. We are leaving in 10 minutes. "I thought you said I wasn't coming," I said. "Change of plans," she said, checking her reflection in my mirror. "Liam's assistant called the house line this morning. He specifically requested that the entire team be present. That includes you." A spark of hope ignited in my chest. Liam. He had done this. He knew they would try to leave me behind. And Sophia? Renee turned to me, her eyes narrowing. "If you make one wrong move, if you say one word out of turn, I will make sure you spend the rest of your life in a cell. Do not test me." I looked at her. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I walked to the closet. I put on my only clean outfit, a simple black dress and a pair of worn flats. I looked like a shadow, which was perfect. I walked out to the car. Jasmine was already in the back seat, surrounded by cooler bags containing my hard work. She looked nervous, but excited. "Ready to make history?" she asked, smirking at me. I looked at the cooler bags. Inside were the tarts that would liquefy, the soufflés that would collapse, the chocolate that would turn gray. "Yes," I said, climbing into the car. "I am ready." The drive to the city was silent. The Atlanta skyline rose up before us, a kingdom of glass and steel. We pulled up to the Sterling headquarters. It was massive, intimidating. Valets opened the doors. We stepped out. Jasmine strutted toward the entrance, my mother flanking her like a bodyguard. I followed behind, carrying the heaviest equipment box. Security stopped us at the front desk. "Name?" the guard asked. "Jasmine Vance, +2, Jasmine said, flipping her hair. "We are here for the board meeting." The guard checked his list. He frowned. "I see Jasmine Vance." "And Renee Vance." He looked up. "I do not see a Sophia Vance on the list." My mother turned to me, a cruel smile playing on her lips. "Oh, what a shame. It seems there was a mix-up." "Well, Sophia, you will just have to wait in the lobby. We cannot keep the board waiting." She reached for the equipment box I was holding. "I will take that." Panic surged. If I didn't get into that room, I couldn't trigger the trap. I couldn't reveal the truth. But the guard held up a hand. "Wait." He tapped his screen. "I do have a special clearance request here for a Ms. Sophia." He looked at me. "It was added by the CEO's office 5 minutes ago. You are cleared for the executive elevator. In fact, you are requested to go up first." My mother's smile vanished. Jasmine looked confused. "Why would Liam want her up first?" Jasmine asked. The guard shrugged. "I just follow orders, ma'am. Ms. Sophia, if you will follow me." I looked at my mother. Her face was a mask of suspicion and fear. She knew something was wrong, but she couldn't make a scene in the lobby of Sterling Hotels. I handed the box to Jasmine. "You carry it," I said softly. "It is your menu after all." I walked past them toward the golden elevator doors. As the doors closed, separating me from them, I let out a breath. I was in. I was ascending, up, 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 to the top floor, to the Judgment Day. The elevator dinged, the doors opened. I stepped into a hallway lined with expensive art. At the end of the hall, double mahogany doors stood closed. I walked toward them. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. I reached for the handle. This was it. No turning back. I pushed the doors open. The room was vast. A long table stretched down the center. 12 people in expensive suits turned to look at me. And at the head of the table sat Liam. He didn't smile. He just nodded once. "Welcome, Sophia," he said. "We have been waiting for you." I stepped inside. The Phoenix had arrived. The night before the tasting was a masterclass in psychological warfare. The air in the kitchen was so thick with tension, you could almost taste the metallic tang of anxiety mixed with the lingering scent of burnt caramel. My mother had finally unlocked my bedroom door, but only because Jasmine needed me. She needed the final piece of the puzzle, the showstopper, the dessert that was supposed to seal the $15 million deal. We called it Death by Chocolate. But as I sat at the kitchen island with a pen in my hand, I knew it was going to live up to its name in a way neither of them expected. Jasmine paced back and forth behind me, her heels clicking on the tile floor like a ticking clock. She was manic, fueled by diet pills and desperation. "Write it down," she snapped, tapping her long fingernails on the marble counter. "Every single step. And do not use those fancy culinary terms. Write it so a normal person can understand. I need to be able to explain it to the board as I am slicing it." I looked down at the blank white index card. This was it. The final trap. The Death by Chocolate was a delicate ecosystem of fats and proteins. It relied on a precise balance of acidity and alkalinity to hold its structure. It was a high-risk, high-reward cake. If baked perfectly, it was a dark, fudgy masterpiece that stood tall and proud. If the chemistry was off by even a fraction, it was a disaster. I started writing. I listed the ingredients faithfully at first. Valrhona 70% dark chocolate, unsalted butter, European style, espresso powder to deepen the flavor profile. Jasmine watched over my shoulder, reading aloud. "Okay, chocolate, butter, coffee. Got it. Keep going." Then I reached the leavening agents. This was the heart of the sabotage. In a cake this dense, you typically use a small amount of baking soda. The soda reacts with the acidity of the chocolate and the buttermilk to create a slow, steady rise. It builds a strong internal crumb structure that can support the weight of the ganache. But I did not write baking soda. Instead, I wrote 3 tablespoons of baking powder. To the untrained eye, it looked like a harmless substitution. Powder, soda, what is the difference? They are both white powders that make cakes rise, but chemically, they are enemies. Baking powder is a double-acting agent. It reacts once when it hits the liquid and again when it hits the heat. By increasing the amount to 3 tablespoons, I was essentially creating a chemical explosion. The cake would rise. Oh, it would rise beautifully. In the oven, it would puff up to an impressive height, looking light and airy. It would look perfect sitting on the display table. But inside? Inside, it would be a house of cards. The excessive gas bubbles would stretch the gluten network until it was paper thin. There would be no structural integrity. The moment a knife cut through the outer crust, the moment the surface tension was broken, the air would rush out. The entire cake would collapse in on itself, turning into a dense, gummy crater of sadness. I finished writing the instruction. I kept my hand steady. I did not let a single tremor betray the malice in my heart. "Here," I said, sliding the card across the counter. Jasmine snatched it up. She squinted at the measurements. 3 tablespoons of baking powder?" she asked, looking at me with a flicker of suspicion. "That seems like a lot. The box mix usually only calls for a teaspoon." I looked her dead in the eye. This is not a box mix, Jasmine. This is a heavy, flourless sponge. If you do not use enough power, it will be a brick. You want it to be tall, do not you? You want it to tower over the plate? Jasmine's vanity took the bait instantly. She nodded vigorously. Yes, tall is good. Tall looks expensive. Liam loves expensive things. Exactly, I said, suppressing the urge to smile. This will make it the tallest cake they have ever seen. Just make sure you tell them that the height comes from your special aeration technique. I will, she said, clutching the card to her chest like it was a winning lottery ticket. She looked at the recipe one last time, memorizing the lie. God, I am going to look so good tomorrow. She walked over to the reflection in the oven door, posing with an imaginary knife. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, she practiced, her voice dripping with fake humility. I present to you the crown jewel of the Sterling menu. A cake that defies gravity, just like our prophets will. She laughed, a high, tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. She turned back to me, and the smile dropped from her face, replaced by a sneer of pure contempt. You know, Sophia, she said, walking slowly toward me, I almost feel sorry for you. Almost. She leaned in close, her expensive perfume choking me. After tomorrow, everything changes. Once I sign that contract, I am going to be a global brand. I will be traveling to Paris, Tokyo, Dubai. I will be the face of modern luxury. And you? She poked a finger into my chest, right over my heart. You will be nothing. Mom and I talked about it, she continued, her eyes gleaming with cruelty. We cannot have you hanging around the bakery anymore. You are a liability. You are depressing to look at with your burns and your tragic little attitude. It ruins the vibe. So, as soon as the ink is dry on that contract, you are out. She straightened up, crossing her arms. Pack your bags tonight, Sophia, because when we come back from the meeting tomorrow, I want you gone. No severance, no goodbye. Just gone. You can sleep under a bridge for all I care. You are not my sister anymore. You are just a stain I am finally scrubbing out. She laughed again, spun on her heel, and marched out of the kitchen, clutching the recipe that would destroy her life. I sat there in the silence of the kitchen. Her words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. But they did not hurt me. Not anymore. Because she did not know that the bridge she was planning to burn was the only thing holding her up. I looked at the bag of baking powder on the counter. Goodbye, Jasmine, I whispered. I stood up and walked to my room. I did not pack my bags. I did not cry. I laid down on my bed and stared at the ceiling, waiting for the sun to rise. I was ready to be homeless. I was ready to be nothing. Because tomorrow, for one glorious, chaotic moment, I was going to watch the world burn. And I was going to be the one holding the match. The death by chocolate was set. The timer was ticking. And 0 hour was just a sunrise away. The air inside the Sterling boardroom was colder than the walk-in freezer had been. It was a dry, recycled cold that smelled of lemon polish and aggressive cologne. I sat in the leather chair that cost more than my entire culinary school tuition, positioned slightly back from the main table. I was the ghost in the room, the shadow that didn't belong. Yet I was the only one who knew that a bomb was about to go off. Liam sat at the head of the table, his face unreadable. He did not look at me. He did not acknowledge the secret glance we had shared in the elevator. He was in full CEO mode, tapping a gold pen against a stack of legal documents. 12 board members sat around the mahogany table. They were intimidating men and women with gray hair and sharp eyes, the kind of people who could ruin a company with a single vote. They whispered among themselves, checking their watches, impatient for the show to begin. They were expecting a prodigy. They were expecting the next big thing in global hospitality. Then, the double doors swung open. Jasmine made her entrance. And I had to admit, she knew how to make an entrance. She was wearing a cream-colored power suit that hugged her figure perfectly, paired with Louboutin heels that clicked rhythmically against the marble floor. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek, high ponytail, and her makeup was flawless, hiding the dark circles of a sleepless night. My mother walked a step behind her, carrying her purse like a dedicated manager, beaming with pride. "Gentlemen, ladies," Jasmine said, her voice smooth and practiced. "Thank you for having me." She walked to the front of the room, standing before the projection screen. She didn't look nervous. She looked radiant. It was the confidence of someone who truly believed her own lies. She believed she deserved this. She believed that because she looked the part, she was the part. Renee took a seat in the back row, right next to me. She didn't look at me, but she leaned in close, her whisper sharp as a razor. "Sit up straight," she hissed, "and keep your mouth shut. If you ruin this, you are dead." I didn't flinch. I just watched my sister. Jasmine began her presentation. She pressed a button on the clicker and the screen lit up with high-definition photos of desserts. My desserts. There was the lemon tart I had perfected over 3 years. There was the raspberry millefeuille I had wept over. "When I think about pastry," Jasmine said, reciting the words I had written for her on the index cards, "I do not just think about sugar. I think about architecture. I think about emotion. Every bite should be a story." The board members stopped whispering. They leaned in. She was saying all the right things. "My grandmother taught me that baking is an act of love," Jasmine continued, placing a hand over her heart. "She told me that you cannot rush perfection. You have to listen to the ingredients. You have to respect the chemistry." I dug my fingernails into my palms. Those were my grandmother's words to me. Jasmine had never listened to Grandma. She used to complain that the kitchen was too hot and the flour ruined her clothes. Hearing her twist those memories into a sales pitch made my stomach turn. Liam watched her. He was leaning back in his chair, his fingers steepled under his chin. He looked impressed. Or maybe he was just a better actor than she was. Jasmine moved to the next slide. It showed the sketches of the new menu. "For Sterling Hotels, I wanted to create a menu that reflects your legacy," she said, her voice swelling with passion. "Classic but innovative, timeless but bold. I call it the golden standard." She finished her speech with a dazzling smile. There was a moment of silence, and then the board members began to applaud. It wasn't polite applause. It was genuine, enthusiastic applause. One of the older men nodded approvingly. "Very impressive, Ms. Vance," he said. "We have heard a lot of pitches, but your philosophy, it aligns perfectly with our brand." "Thank you," Jasmine beamed, giving a small, humble bow. My mother let out a breath beside me. She reached over and squeezed my knee hard. "See?" she whispered. "That is what star power looks like. Learn from her." Liam cleared his throat. The room went silent instantly. "A lovely speech, Jasmine," Liam said. "But at Sterling, we do not eat speeches. We eat results. He snapped his fingers. The side doors opened. 2 waiters in white gloves rolled in a silver cart. On top of the cart, under a glass dome, sat the masterpiece, The Death by Chocolate. It was magnificent. I had to give myself credit. Even with the sabotage baked into its DNA, it looked incredible. The excessive baking powder had done its job. The cake had risen to a majestic height, towering over the plate. I had glazed it with the unstable ganache just before we left the house, so it was still dark and glossy, reflecting the chandelier lights above. It looked like a dark monolith of pure indulgence. The board members murmured in appreciation. "My God, look at the height on that," one woman whispered. "It is like a sculpture," another said. Jasmine's eyes lit up. She walked over to the cart as the waiters lifted the glass dome. The smell of rich, dark chocolate filled the room, masking the chemical instability lurking beneath the surface. "This," Jasmine announced, gesturing to the cake like a magician revealing a tiger, "is the Death by Chocolate. It is a flourless sponge, aerated using a proprietary technique to achieve maximum lift without sacrificing density. It is topped with a 70% Valrhona ganache." She looked at Liam, daring him to challenge her. Liam stood up. He walked slowly around the table, his eyes fixed on the cake. He circled it like a predator. "Proprietary aeration technique," Liam repeated. "Fascinating." He stopped in front of the cart. He looked at Jasmine, then he looked past her, straight at me. For a second, his eyes locked onto mine. I saw a flicker of anticipation. He knew. Jasmine picked up a silver cake knife. "Shall I serve the board?" she asked, her hand hovering over the glossy surface. Liam reached out. He placed his hand over hers. "No," Liam said softly. Jasmine froze. "Why not?" "Because," Liam said, taking the knife from her hand, "a cake this expensive, a cake that is worth $15 million, deserves to be cut by the person signing the check." He held the knife up. The silver blade caught the light. It was sharp, heavy. "Allow me the honor," Liam said. He positioned the knife over the center of the cake. The board members held their breath, their forks ready. Jasmine smiled, confident, triumphant. She thought she had won. She thought the hard part was over. I watched the tip of the knife touch the glossy ganache. I counted down in my head. 3, 2, 1. The surface tension was about to break, and so was she. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the air conditioning unit and the frantic beating of my sister's heart. Liam held the silver knife poised above the glossy, dark surface of the cake. It looked perfect. It reflected the crystal chandelier above like a black mirror. To the 12 board members sitting around the table, it was a masterpiece of culinary architecture. To me, it was a biological weapon waiting to be detonated. Jasmine was beaming, her hands clasped under her chin, already imagining the applause, the contract, the millions of dollars flowing into her bank account. She had no idea that she was staring at her own execution. Liam pressed down. The knife broke the surface tension of the chocolate ganache. That was the trigger. The moment the crust was breached, the physics of my sabotage kicked in. The 3 tablespoons of baking powder I had forced Jasmine to add had created massive, unstable pockets of carbon dioxide inside the sponge. Without the proper gluten structure to hold it, the cake was essentially a balloon made of mud. There was a sound. It was not the appetizing crunch of a crust breaking. It was a wet, sickening squelch, like a boot stepping into deep mud. Then came the hiss. Whoosh! The air rushed out of the cake with an audible sigh. The majestic height that Jasmine had bragged about, that gravity-defying lift, vanished in a single second. The center of the cake imploded. The sides caved in. The glossy, beautiful exterior buckled and folded like a collapsing building. What happened next was grotesque. Because of the arrowroot powder I had substituted for the cornstarch, the filling inside had not set. It had turned into a viscous liquid. As the structure collapsed, this gray, lukewarm sludge erupted from the cracks in the ganache. It oozed out onto the silver platter, spreading like a toxic oil spill. It did not look like chocolate. It looked like industrial waste. But the visual horror was nothing compared to the smell. The excessive baking powder, reacting with the heat and the lack of acid, had released a potent byproduct during the rapid collapse: ammonia. It hit the room like a physical slap, a sharp, stinging chemical stench that burned the nostrils and watered the eyes. It smelled like dirty cat litter and floor cleaner mixed with burnt sugar. A collective gasp went around the table, followed immediately by the sound of coughing. Oh my God. One of the board members, an elderly woman in pearls, gagged and pressed a napkin to her nose.
What is that smell? It smells like urine.
Another member choked out, pushing his chair back, scraping it loudly against the marble floor to get away from the cart. Jasmine stood frozen. Her smile was still plastered on her face, but her eyes were wide with terror. She watched as the $15 million cake turned into a puddle of bubbling gray slime right in front of the people who held her future in their hands. "No," she whispered. "No, that is not right." Liam pulled the knife back. The blade was coated in the gray sludge. He looked at it with a mixture of disgust and cold fascination. He did not look surprised. He looked like a scientist who had just successfully proven a hypothesis. "Interesting texture," Liam said, his voice cutting through the sounds of people gagging. "Is this the proprietary aeration technique you mentioned, Jasmine? It seems to be breathing." Jasmine snapped out of her trance. Panic took the wheel. She did not look at the cake. She looked for a scapegoat. She looked at the waiters. "You!" she screamed, pointing a shaking finger at the young man who had rolled the cart in. "What did you do to it? You dropped it, didn't you? You shook the cart!" The waiter looked terrified. "Ma'am, I didn't touch it, I swear." "Liar!" Jasmine shrieked. She was losing control completely. Her carefully crafted persona of the elegant, sophisticated chef was dissolving faster than the cake. "It is the humidity in this room. It is too hot. Or the fridge. The hotel fridge must have malfunctioned. You people ruined my creation." She ran to the cart, frantically trying to push the collapsing pieces of cake back together with her bare hands. It was a pathetic sight. Her manicured fingers dug into the sludge, getting coated in the gray mess. "Stop looking at it," she yelled at the board members. "It tastes fine. It is just the presentation. The flavor is still there. Here, try it." She grabbed a handful of the goop and held it out toward the elderly woman. "Get away from me!" The woman recoiled, looking at Jasmine as if she were insane. My mother, Renee, had turned the color of ash. She sank low in her chair, trying to make herself invisible. She knew. In that moment, she knew exactly what had happened. She looked over at me. I was sitting perfectly still. I did not smile. I did not frown. I just watched. I watched the monster they had created destroy herself. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Jasmine was sobbing now, scrubbing her sticky hands on her cream-colored suit, leaving brown and gray stains all over the expensive fabric. "Liam, please," she begged, turning to him. "This is sabotage! Someone tampered with the ingredients! It was the staff! I demand an investigation! I am a victim here!" She reached for Liam, trying to grab his arm with her dirty hands. Liam stepped back, avoiding her touch with a look of pure revulsion. He dropped the dirty knife onto the table. It clattered loudly, silencing Jasmine's hysterics for a brief second. "Sabotage." Liam repeated the word slowly. "You think someone sabotaged you, Jasmine?" "Yes, yes!" Jasmine nodded frantically, tears streaming down her face, creating tracks through her perfect makeup. "Someone who is jealous of me. Someone who wants to see me fail. You have to believe me, Liam." Liam looked at her. Then he looked at the board members, who were whispering among themselves, shaking their heads, writing things down in their notebooks that definitely were not contract offers. "I believe that there is a liar in this room," Liam said, "but I do not think it is the staff." He walked back to the head of the table. He stood there, commanding the room. The smell of ammonia was still thick in the air, a testament to the fraud that had just occurred. Jasmine wiped her nose with the back of her hand. What are you talking about?" Liam did not answer her directly. He looked at the large projection screen behind her, the one that still displayed the slide titled "The Golden Standard." "You said that baking is about honesty, Jasmine," Liam said, his voice rising, filling the cavernous room. "You said it is about listening to the ingredients. Well, those ingredients are speaking loud and clear right now. They are saying that you do not know the difference between baking powder and baking soda. They are saying that you do not know that arrowroot breaks down in dairy. They are saying that you are a fraud." Jasmine opened her mouth to argue, but Liam slammed his hand down on the mahogany table. Bang! The sound echoed like a gunshot. Everyone jumped. Even my mother flinched. "Enough!" Liam roared. The silence that followed was absolute. Liam straightened his tie. He looked at the tech guy standing in the corner of the room. "Kill the presentation slides," Liam ordered. Then, he turned his gaze back to Jasmine, his eyes cold and hard as diamonds. "And turn on the security feed from my kitchen." Liam did not wait for an answer. He picked up a remote control from the table and pointed it at the wall. The screen flickered, the image of the disastrous cake vanishing, replaced by grainy but high-definition footage. The room went dead silent. The date stamp in the corner of the video showed it was from 3 days ago. It was the interior of the Sterling Estate kitchen. On the screen, Jasmine was standing over me. I was on the floor, scrubbing the tile. Jasmine was shouting, her face twisted in rage. The audio was crystal clear. "You are useless, Sophia!" Jasmine's voice rang out through the speakers, sharp and cruel. "You are just a baker, a low-class, flour-covered nobody." The board members gasped. They looked from the screen to the woman standing in front of them in the cream suit. Jasmine was trembling, her hands covering her mouth. Liam pressed a button. The video jumped forward. Now the screen showed the freezer incident. It showed Jasmine shoving me into the walk-in freezer. It showed her locking the door. It showed her laughing as she walked away, checking her reflection in the microwave. Oh my God. The elderly woman in pearls whispered, her hand flying to her throat. She locked her in. That is attempted murder. Another board member muttered, his face grim. Then, the video cut to the most damning footage of all. It was the night of the brioche disaster. Jasmine was standing by the mixer, pouring the blue cleaning fluid into the dough. But it was the conversation that followed that sealed her fate. "I do not know how to bake, Mom," Jasmine's voice screamed from the speakers. "I do not know the difference between yeast and baking powder. If Sophia leaves, I am ruined." And then, my mother's voice. "Do not worry, Jasmine. We will make sure she never leaves. We own her. She is our slave." Renee let out a choked sound from the back of the room. She stood up, knocking her chair over. This is illegal!" she screeched, pointing a shaking finger at Liam. "You cannot record us without our consent. I will sue you." Liam didn't even look at her. He just kept his eyes on the screen. The video ended with a shot of me, sitting alone in the dark kitchen, bandaging my burns with duct tape because Jasmine had thrown away my first aid kit. The screen went black. Liam turned to the board. "This is the woman you were about to give $15 million to. A fraud, a bully, and quite possibly a criminal." Jasmine was hyperventilating. She looked around the room, searching for an ally, searching for a way out. But the faces staring back at her were filled with disgust. "It is a deep fake!" she yelled, her voice cracking. "It is AI! He made it up because he wants to break up with me, and he does not want to pay the penalty fee." She ran to the table, grabbing the arm of the chairman. "Sir, please! You know my reputation. I am an influencer. I have millions of followers. I built this brand." The chairman pulled his arm away as if she were contagious. "Ms. Vance," he said coldly, "I think you should leave, before we call the police." "No!" Jasmine screamed. "I am not leaving until I sign that contract. I earned this!" She lunged for the contract that was sitting in front of Liam. She grabbed the pen. "I will sign it. I will sign it right now. Then you have to pay me." Liam caught her wrist. His grip was iron. "You will not sign anything, Jasmine, because there is no contract for you. There never was." He released her, and she stumbled back, hitting the cart with the ruined cake. The gray sludge splattered onto her expensive shoes. But the tasting," she stammered. "The tasting was a test," Liam said, "and you failed." "But the real creator of this menu? The real genius behind the golden standard? She passed with flying colors." He looked at the double doors at the end of the room. Everyone turned. Jasmine wiped the tears and sludge from her face, confusion warring with fear in her eyes. Renee stopped her ranting, her mouth hanging open. The heavy mahogany doors began to open, slowly, dramatically. A silhouette appeared in the doorway. It was not the girl in the dirty apron. It was not the girl with the flower in her hair and the fear in her eyes. I stepped into the light. I was wearing a tailored black suit that I had bought an hour ago with the last of the cash from my car sale. My hair was slicked back, sharp and professional. My burns were covered by the sleek fabric of the jacket. I stood tall, my shoulders back, my chin held high. I held a leather portfolio in my hand. The room was silent. Jasmine stared at me. She blinked, as if she couldn't process what she was seeing. "Sophia?" she whispered. I didn't answer her. I didn't even look at her. I walked past her, my heels striking the floor with a rhythmic, powerful cadence. I walked straight to the head of the table. I stopped next to Liam. He stood up and pulled out the chair next to him, the seat of honor. I sat down. I placed my portfolio on the table. I looked at the board members, meeting their gazes one by one. "Good afternoon," I said, my voice steady, clear and commanding. "My name is Sophia Vance. I am the owner of Phoenix Culinary Solutions, and I believe you have been tasting my work." Jasmine let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. "You?" she shrieked. "You are the help! You are nobody! Get out of that chair!" I turned to her slowly. I looked at her with the cold detachment of a stranger. "I am not the help, Jasmine," I said softly. "I am the landlord, and your eviction notice is overdue." The silence that followed my declaration was absolute. It was the kind of silence that happens after a bomb detonates, before the ringing in your ears begins. Jasmine stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. She looked from me to the board members, desperate for someone to laugh, for someone to tell her that this was just a cruel joke. But nobody was laughing. The men and women around the table were looking at me with a new expression. It was not pity. It was not dismissal. It was respect. "You are insane," Jasmine finally sputtered, her voice trembling. "You are having a breakdown, Sophia." "Mom, call security. She is hallucinating. She thinks she owns a company." I did not move. I did not raise my voice. I simply gestured to the double doors. "Mr. Davis, if you please." The doors opened again, and my lawyer, Mr. Davis, walked in. He was carrying a thick briefcase and wearing a suit that cost more than Jasmine's car. He didn't look at my mother or my sister. He walked straight to the table and placed a stack of documents in front of the chairman. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," Mr. Davis announced, his voice booming in the quiet room. "My name is Alan Davis, senior partner at Davis & Associates. I represent Ms. Sophia Vance, the sole proprietor and CEO of Phoenix Culinary Solutions." "Phoenix?" Jasmine whispered, the color draining from her face. She looked at me, her eyes wide with horror. That is the company Liam has been talking about. The one with the patents." "Correct," Mr. Davis said, opening a file. He pulled out a document with a gold seal. He held it up for the room to see. "This is a federal utility patent for a proprietary chemical leavening process involving heat-stabilized sugar structures. It was filed 6 months ago by my client." He pulled out another document. "This is the trademark registration for the brand identity, The Ghost Alchemist. And this," he said, dropping a heavy binder onto the table with a loud thud, "is a cease and desist order against Ms. Jasmine Vance and Mrs. Renee Vance for the unauthorized use, theft, and attempted replication of my client's intellectual property." The chairman picked up the papers. He scanned them, his glasses sliding down his nose. He looked at Liam. "Mr. Sterling, were you aware of this?" Liam leaned back in his chair. He looked at Jasmine, who was now clinging to the edge of the table for support. "I was," Liam said calmly. "In fact, I have been in negotiations with Phoenix Culinary Solutions for weeks. But I needed to be sure. I needed to know if the person standing in front of me was the talent or just the thief." He stood up and walked over to Jasmine. She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face, ruining what was left of her makeup. "Liam, please," she begged, reaching for his hand. "I did it for us. I wanted to be worthy of you. I can learn. I can take classes. Just give me a chance." Liam looked down at her. His face was not angry. It was indifferent. It was the look you give to a stranger who has bumped into you on the street. "There is no us, Jasmine," Liam said. "I do not marry liabilities. And I certainly do not do business with frauds. The engagement is off. You can keep the ring. Consider it a severance package." Jasmine let out a wail that sounded more animal than human. She fell to her knees, grabbing the hem of his pants. "No! You cannot do this! I am Jasmine Vance! I have 2 million followers! You will regret this! I will destroy you on social media!" Liam signaled to the security guards who were standing by the door. "Escort Ms. Vance out of the building," Liam ordered, "and ensure she does not stop in the lobby." 2 large guards stepped forward. They grabbed Jasmine by her arms. She kicked and screamed, her heels scraping against the marble floor. "Get off me! Do you know who I am? Mom! Do something! Help me!" My mother, Renee, was pressed against the back wall. She looked at Jasmine being dragged away like a sack of trash. She looked at the board members who were watching the scene with distaste. She looked at Liam. And then she looked at me. She did not move to help her favorite daughter. She did not say a word. She just watched as Jasmine was hauled out of the double doors, her screams echoing down the hallway until they were cut off by the heavy thud of the doors closing. The room was quiet again. Liam turned to me. He smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had seen on his face all day. "Miss Vance," he said, gesturing to the seat next to him. "Shall we talk business?" I sat down. Mr. Davis opened another file. "The proposal is simple," Liam said, addressing the board. "Sterling Hotels will acquire Phoenix Culinary Solutions for a cash sum of $25 million. In addition, Sophia Vance will come on board as the Global Creative Director of Food and Beverage, with a 5% equity stake in the hospitality division." $25 million. The number hung in the air. I kept my face neutral, but inside I was screaming. It was more than enough to buy the bakery back. It was enough to buy the whole block. It was freedom. The board members nodded. They were business people. They didn't care about the drama. They cared about the product. And they knew, having tasted the disastrous cake made by Jasmine, that the real value was sitting in front of them. "Agreed," the chairman said. Mr. Davis slid the contract toward me. I picked up the pen. It was the same pen I had used to write the fake recipe for Jasmine. I signed my name, Sophia Vance. The ink looked black and permanent on the white paper. As I put the pen down, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I looked up. It was my mother. She had crept up behind me while I was signing. Her eyes were wet with tears. Not tears of sadness for Jasmine, tears of joy. Tears of greed. "Sophia, baby," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Oh, I knew it. I knew you were the special one. I always told your father you had a gift." She squeezed my shoulder, her fingers digging into the fabric of my new suit. $25 million, she breathed. "We are going to be so rich. We can finally fix up the house. We can take that trip to Europe. I am so proud of you, honey. We did it. We really did it." I stood up slowly. I turned to face her. She was smiling. That same manipulative, charming smile she had used on me for 32 years. She thought she could pivot. She thought that because Jasmine had failed, she could just switch horses mid-race. She thought I was still the desperate little girl craving her approval. I looked her up and down. "We?" I asked. "Yes, us," she said, reaching for my hand. "We are a family, Sophia. Families stick together. I know I was hard on you, but it was only to push you to greatness. Look where you are now. It was my tough love that got you here." I pulled my hand away. I reached into my leather portfolio. "There is no we, Mother," I said, "and there is no house to fix up." I pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a photocopy of a document I had found in her desk when I was looking for the deed to the bakery. "What is this?" she asked, her smile faltering. "This," I said, holding it up for Liam and the board to see, "is a loan agreement. Specifically, a high-interest private loan you took out 6 months ago." Renee went pale. Her eyes darted around the room. "Put that away," she hissed. "That is private financial business." "It is not private when you use the house as collateral," I said. "You forged Dad's signature, didn't you? You took out a second mortgage on the family home to fund Jasmine's lifestyle, to buy her followers, to pay for her trips." I had to," she stammered. "She is an investment. She was going to pay it back." "Well, she didn't," I said coldly, "and neither did you. I checked the bank records this morning. You have missed 4 payments. The bank initiated foreclosure proceedings yesterday." Renee grabbed the edge of the table. "No," she whispered. "That is impossible. I have time." "You have no time," I said. "You have 24 hours. But you have money now." She grabbed my arm again, her nails clawing at me. "You have $25 million. You can pay it off. You can save the house. Sophia, please. It is your childhood home." I looked at her hand on my arm. I thought about the freezer. I thought about the burns. I thought about the years of being treated like a servant in that house. I looked her in the eye. "That house is not my home," I said. "It is just a building where I survived." I gently but firmly removed her hand from my arm. "And as for the money?" I leaned in close so only she could hear the venom in my voice. "That money belongs to Phoenix Culinary Solutions. And Phoenix does not invest in sinking ships." Renee stared at me. The realization hit her. She had lost both daughters. She had lost the house. She had lost everything. Liam stepped forward. "Mrs. Vance," he said, his voice polite but firm, "this is a private meeting for shareholders and partners. You are neither. Security is waiting to escort you to your car." My mother looked at me one last time. She opened her mouth to beg, to scream, to curse me. But she saw the look in my eyes. It was a wall of ice. There was no way through. She turned and walked away, a broken, defeated woman. I watched her go. I felt a weight lift off my chest, a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying since I was 5 years old. Liam turned to me. He held out his hand. "Ready to get to work, partner?" he asked. I took his hand. His grip was warm and solid. "I am ready," I said. "But before we start," I added, pulling one last document from my portfolio, "there is one loose end I need to tie up." I placed the paper on the table. It was the deed to Grandma's oven, the bakery my mother had threatened to sell. "The developer she was going to sell this to?" I asked. Liam glanced at the paper. "I know him," Liam said. "He is a subsidiary of Sterling." "Good," I said. "Tell him the sale is canceled. The owner has returned, and she is raising the rent." The fall of the House of Vance was not quiet. It was a spectacle, exactly the kind of public display my mother and sister had spent their entire lives trying to avoid. 2 days after the board meeting, the bank trucks arrived. The foreclosure process, accelerated by the discovery of the fraudulent loan documents I had exposed, was brutal and swift. I did not go there to watch. I did not need to see my mother crying as her vintage furniture was hauled out onto the lawn. I did not need to see Jasmine screaming at the repo men taking her leased luxury car. I heard about it, though. The neighbors, the ones Renee had looked down on for decades, saw everything. They whispered about it in the grocery store. They posted about it on neighborhood apps. The facade of perfection had not just cracked. It had shattered into a million humiliating pieces. Jasmine's downfall was even more public. Sterling Hotels did not just fire her. They made an example of her. The lawsuit filed against her for attempted fraud and breach of contract was headline news in the culinary world. But the real blow came from the very people she worshipped, her followers. When the footage of her in the kitchen, pouring cleaning fluid into the dough and admitting she couldn't bake, was leaked, not by me, but by an anonymous source inside the board meeting, the internet turned on her. The comments section, once her source of validation, became her prison. The hashtag #FakeChefJasmine trended for 3 days. She lost her brand deals. She lost her verified checkmark. She lost her identity. Last I heard, Jasmine is working at a cosmetics counter in a mall 3 towns over, wearing a name tag that she tries to hide whenever someone takes out a phone. She spends her days selling false hope in a bottle, which is ironic, considering that is all she ever really had to offer. She tried to call me once, a month ago. I didn't block the number. I just watched it ring until it stopped. That silence was my answer. That silence was my closure. My mother, Renee, fared no better. With the house gone and her credit score destroyed by the fraud investigation, she had nowhere to go. She had burned bridges with every relative who might have taken her in. Her high society friends, the ones she had prioritized over her own daughter, evaporated the moment the money ran out. She ended up in a state-assisted living facility on the south side of the city. It is clean, but it is not luxurious. There are no marble floors. There are no private chefs. She shares a room with a woman who hums constantly and watches game shows at full volume. I pay for her medication. I send a check every month to cover her basic necessities. It is not out of love, and it is certainly not out of obligation. It is because I am not her. I do not abandon people, even people who deserve it. But I do not visit. I do not call. The check is the only communication she gets from me. It is a reminder that she is surviving solely on the charity of the child she called a failure. That is a punishment far worse than poverty for a woman like Renee. It is the death of her pride. While they were sinking, I was building. The $25 million acquisition by Sterling Hotels hit my bank account, but I didn't go on a spending spree. I didn't buy a mansion to show off. The first thing I did was drive back to the old neighborhood. I walked up to the boarded-up windows of Grandma's oven. I peeled the foreclosure notice off the glass. I bought the building back that afternoon. But I didn't just restore it. I evolved it. I gutted the interior, expanding the kitchen into a state-of-the-art research and development lab. I kept the old sign, though. Grandma's oven still hangs above the door, a reminder of where I came from. But inside, it is the headquarters of Phoenix Culinary Solutions. We are not just a bakery. We are a food science innovation hub. We develop stable, high-quality pastry solutions for hotels, airlines, and luxury cruise lines around the world. I hired a staff of 10, not servants, partners. I pay them well. I give them credit for their ideas. I created the environment I never had, a kitchen fueled by respect, not fear. Every morning when I walk in and smell the yeast and vanilla, I don't feel anxiety anymore. I feel peace. I feel ownership. 6 months after the board meeting, I found myself in New York City. The air was crisp, carrying the electric energy of Manhattan. I stepped out onto the private terrace of the Sterling Tower penthouse. The city lights sprawled out below us like a sea of diamonds, infinite and breathtaking. Liam was already there, leaning against the glass railing, holding 2 crystal flutes of vintage champagne. He turned when he heard my footsteps. He didn't look like the terrifying CEO anymore. He looked relaxed. He looked like an equal. "You are late, Ms. Vance," he teased, turning to face me. "I am never late, Mr. Sterling," I replied, walking over to join him. "I was just reviewing the quarterly projections. The lemon tart expansion in the European market is up 40%. Liam chuckled, handing me a glass. "Always working. You know you can take a night off. We won." I took the glass, the bubbles catching the light of the skyline. I looked out at the city, thinking about the girl who used to cry in a pantry, thinking about the burns on my arms that had finally faded to pale white scars. "We did not just win, Liam," I said softly. "We survived." Liam's expression sobered. He clinked his glass against mine, a clear, sharp sound that rang out in the night air. "To the ones who underestimated us," he said. I looked him in the eye. There was no romance there, no cheesy declaration of undying love. It was something better. It was the profound, unshakable respect between 2 people who had seen the worst of each other's worlds and chosen to build something better. "To the ones who made us dangerous," I corrected him. We drank. The champagne was cold and dry, tasting of victory. I leaned against the railing, looking down at the millions of people below. Somewhere down there, people were fighting their own battles. Somewhere, a girl was being told she wasn't enough. Somewhere, a sister was stealing credit. Somewhere, a mother was choosing a favorite. If you are watching this, and you feel like you are trapped in that darkness, listen to me. They want you to break. They want you to scream. They want you to become bitter so they can point a finger and say, "See, she is crazy." Do not give them that satisfaction. Your worth is not defined by how they treat you. It is defined by what you can create when they are not looking. Keep your head down. Sharpen your skills. Build your exit strategy in the silence. Let them think they are winning. Let them think you are weak. Let them lock you in the freezer, because the cold preserves you. The pressure hardens you. And when the door finally opens, you won't just walk out. You will rise. My name is Sophia Vance. I was the scapegoat. I was the shadow. Now, I am the ghost alchemist. And this is just the first course. Thank you for listening to my story. If you have ever had to build your own empire from the ashes of betrayal, tell me about it in the comments. Hit like and subscribe, because the best revenge isn't just surviving. It is thriving so loudly they have no choice but to watch. Stay strong, stay patient, and never, ever let them see you bleed. This journey taught me that true power is not about screaming the loudest. It is about building in silence while others make noise. My family tried to define me by my scars, but they forgot that pressure creates diamonds. I learned that you do not need to burn bridges with anger. Sometimes, you just need to let the toxic people in your life light the match themselves. Your worth is never determined by those who cannot see your value. It is defined by the skills you sharpen in the dark and the resilience you forge when the world tries to freeze you out. If you have ever had to work twice as hard to get half the respect, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice served. Share this video with someone who needs to remember that their time to rise is coming.